Hello everyone, Scientier here, and welcome to the expertise part of my Guild Wars 1 skill review project section on the Ranger. I don't know, these multi-part parts are a little confusing to figure out how to name when I intro, but anyway, we're talking about expertise today. Now, expertise, of course, is the primary attribute of the Ranger profession, which means other professions cannot spec into it. This will come up with a couple of skills. There's also not as many skills in this as in the other attribute lines. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into it, but just remembering that this increases or decreases energy costs for a whole range of skills. Anyway, let's go ahead and start with Archery Signet. So Archery Signet is a 1-second cast time, 12-second recharge elite signet. For 19 seconds, conditions you apply while wielding a bow last twice as long, or 100% longer. I don't ever use this. So this is an interesting one, because fundamentally, this is about making your conditions last longer, which means that they'll be able to do more damage, things like that. The issue here, I guess it might be nice with Throw Dirt. I mean, you just have to be wielding a bow. I assume that they work together. Other than, like, Throw Dirt and making that last twice as long, the problem is a lot of the best skills for applying conditions are going to be elites, and so the fact that you cannot bring this signet along with them, like, I don't need to make a long bleed last even longer. Because here's the thing, right? A lot of the conditions you'd be applying are damage over time. Making those last twice as long is not relevant. Like, yes, it makes them deal a lot more damage, but the thing is, enemies tend to die quickly enough that it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that this skill is not a good elite, because most of the skills that you'd want to boost with it, say Broadhead Arrow, you might want to increase the duration of. Burning Arrow, you'd certainly be happy to double that duration. Incendiary Arrows, which I can't show you properly, and Wilderness Survival. You'd also be happy to increase the duration of the burning from this. All of these are elites, so the fact that this is an elite and therefore I can't use it with those skills is very awkward. Like, Crippling Shot might be nice to boost the duration of. Pin Down, I guess. So basically the skills that you're increasing with this are like Pin Down, Screaming Shot, or like Apply Poison or something. Maybe some of the, like, Throw Dirt or some of the traps. You have to be wielding a bow, obviously, presuming it works with those. I assume it does. I'm going to be blunt here and say that this is just unexciting. The effect is just not strong enough in terms of, like, the effect is plenty strong. Let me get that clear. But it's just not useful enough to increase those durations that I'm going to want to be trying to do this. It's just very... Most of the time, what I want to boost would be elites that I can't, because this is an elite, and I can only have one elite on my bar at a time. So I'm gonna honestly give Archer Signet a 1 here. Most of the conditions are fine durations as they are on the skills already. I don't need to boost them further. Enemies just die too quickly for it to be useful. And that's the thing that's really important here. Like, making conditions last twice as long can be really powerful. You could get a lot more damage out of them or snare enemies for a much longer period of time, provided, of course, they don't have condition removal, which completely invalidates however long you're making them last. So, you know, that's a consideration. Many enemies don't have condition removal, though, so that's not a huge concern. The bigger issue is that you're spending your elite on this effect when you could be spending your elite on a skill that actually does something more worthwhile, because a lot of the enemies are just going to die too quickly. So it's an interesting idea, but the thing is, it just doesn't have a niche to fit into. There's no build that I can conceive of where I want Archer's Signet. I could maybe see some really gimmicky apply poison, pin down type thing in PvP, but that has no room in PvE as far as I'm concerned. You're just wasting your time. Distracting Shot. 5 energy, half-second activation time, 10-second recharge, bow attack. If Distracting Shot hits, it interrupts target foe's action, but deals only 13 damage. That 13 damage, by the way, is armor ignoring. It will just deal that amount of damage. It is very low, however. If the interrupted action was a skill, that skill is disabled for an additional 20 seconds. This is extremely powerful. This is a 5. I'm almost like, if I am doing a ranger build that involves a bow, chances are distracting shot will be on my bar. It has a low energy cost, pretty quick recharge, all things said, and it's a very powerful, reliable interrupt. The additional disable can be quite strong. I remember hearing about people in PvP being really excited when they got a distracting shot on a quick recharging monk skill, and all of a sudden the monk was pretty badly neutered. And it can definitely be useful for that in PvE as well. If you're able to stop like a word of healing or heal other or something, some sort of powerful monk healing spell that the AI would be using a lot, all of a sudden they can't use it anymore, you can potentially crumble things quite a bit. But just in general, this is one of the 2 go-to interrupts. The other one is in marksmanship, a savage shot here. We'll talk about it later. But distracting shot's really good. It's a really solid skill. It's a very strong effect, and you want some interrupts on ranger because that's one of the things that they're good at. The mesmer and the ranger are both kind of they're professions that I think of as being disruptive and pressury. They just, one does it through spells and the other does it through physical attacks. And the distracting shot is a cornerstone of that. It's kind of how Cry of Frustration is often a cornerstone of mesmer builds. So, but perhaps more so. It's kind of almost a power return, except more useful and more powerful and stuff. So, definitely a very powerful skill. Okay, dodge. And also Zojin's haste, because apparently this skill was so great we needed to have it twice. Thanks, factions. So this is a stance. It's 5 energy, 30-second recharge on either of them. It lasts for 10 seconds, and you move 33% faster and have a 65% chance to block incoming projectiles. It ends if you attack. Naturally, this used to be evasion, I'm pretty sure, given the name, but, you know, those were combined quite a long time ago. Dodge is not a skill I ever really use. The thing is, you could use it for the increased movement speed, but 30 seconds is a very long recharge on an increased movement speed skill. The other issue with it is only blocking projectiles is pretty narrow. Usually you're going to want to be able to block melee attacks. I believe when it says incoming projectiles, it's speaking specifically to like bows and spears and stuff like that, wands and staves. I don't think it's talking about projectile spells. To be clear on that, just because I'm pretty sure you can't block those. So yeah, I don't. The fact that it ends if you attack is pretty bad. I would be more interested in this if it just gave you a good chance to block incoming attacks and had a shorter duration, but a significantly shorter recharge, something like that. But as it is, this is pretty awkward. The main time I could see using this is if you're trying to get places quickly, but you've got better options. So as an increased move speed stance, I find both of these to be extremely underwhelming because of the short uptime. Again, so it's really important to have some context. Down here, let me pop out at Beast Mastery so I can properly show you wilderness survival skills with some modicum of stats. So if we look down here in wilderness survival, one of the things that we have is that dodge is trying to compete with natural stride. And if you see natural stride here, it lasts for 7 seconds, and you move faster, and you block 50% of all incoming attacks. It does not end when you attack, and it has a 12-second recharge. So natural stride is basically doing what dodge wants to do, except better. And so the problem that dodge has is it loses out to natural stride. It is not as good at what it's trying to do as natural stride is, as far as I'm concerned. And it's also Storm Chaser is a much better run speed buff. Yes, it's not quite as fast, but it has almost close to 100% uptime by itself. So unfortunately, and I think, yeah, this one doesn't quite, although sort of. Unfortunately, the thing is, dodge and Zojin's haste they're not stopping you from being hit by the melee attacks that you'd want to be able to stop. Their duration is fine. The speed increase is good, but the problem is the recharge to duration ratio is way too long. And they're losing the competition against Natural Stride. So the thing is, too, Ranger doesn't have as much of a use for increased movement speed as other professions do, other physical professions do, because it is a stationary profession. It attacks from range. It doesn't have to move around. It doesn't have to chase things down like, say, a warrior or assassin or dervish do. So, as a consequence of that, dodge and Zojin's haste are just... They're very, very, very awkward in that they're not really serving a purpose. I have other options to do the same thing better, and I don't even need a high-speed movement speed buff because I can just shoot from a range. So all of those said, I'm going to give dodge and Zojin's haste 1s. I just don't have a build that ever wants them, and I just don't think they're very good. I would be more interested in dodge if it was more along the lines of our next skill, escape, or natural stride, or if it was more of a like block the next attack type of thing that might have some other benefit on it or something. I don't know. It needs to fill some sort of niche, and right now it doesn't, and that's my biggest issue with it. Escape. Escape is 5 energy, 12-second recharge, elite stance. For 7 seconds, you move 33% faster and have a 75% chance to block attacks. So this skill has gone through a couple iterations over time. It's very strong in this current iteration. In fact, so strong that the PvP version might have the end if you attack clause on it, similar to dodge. It's very similar to Natural Stride as well, but it doesn't have any sort of end clause, unlike Natural Stride. Escape is a very solid skill if you're looking for this sort of effect. Most builds are not, but if I'm running a melee ranger, which I do from time to time, for example, rangers work daggers fairly well because they get a discount on those attack skills, as an example. Escape is a really solid choice in those sorts of situations because it does have pretty good uptime. You have quick accessibility to it. It has a fairly low cooldown. It allows you to be able to defend yourself if you're being attacked. Those sorts of things make Escape quite solid. I'm going to give this one a 4. I definitely don't bring it all the time or anything like that, but it's definitely one of those skills that I think of and I remember and I'm inclined to bring with me and things like that. So definitely a solid skill and one that I can recommend for certain builds. But certainly a lot of the bow builds do not want Escape. It's generally going to be better on a ranger that is being more of a melee attacker. Expert Focus. Not Experts Focus, Expert Focus. I was, for some reason, thinking it was Experts when I was first recording these skills. It is 10 energy, 2-second activation time, 12-second recharge. It is a preparation. For 24 seconds, your bow attack skills cost 2 less energy and deal 8 extra damage. I believe this discount would apply after expertise. Decreasing the... I mean, either way, it's a nice decrease and a nice little buff on damage. This is a skill that, and a preparation specifically, that can definitely be useful if you're going for more of a damaging, spamming skills type of bow build. In particular, it's one that I like with penetrating attack and its faction's duplicate sundering attack. We'll talk about those more in that time when we talk about those skills, but it's good with those. Preparations generally are a little bit hit or miss, though, on Ranger, because... Okay, so this is something that just needs to be addressed about preparations. Barrage and Volley, its non-elite form, are very powerful skills because they're area of effect. They let you shoot arrows at multiple foes. Both of them remove preparations, so you cannot use preparations with Volley or Barrage. And the fundamental fact of the matter is that I usually am bringing one of those two skills. Because of that, preparations actually are a bit worse. This is one of those things where it's very awkward from a design standpoint. Preparations can do really powerful things, but you're sacrificing your area of effect skills to bring them. Or you mostly are. The incendiary arrows technically is area of effect, and leaves preparations on, but has a much longer recharge than Volley and Barrage do. So the downside of basically where I'm getting to with all this is like, this is a perfectly serviceable preparation. I'm fine with this preparation. Preparations have a very hard time getting on a Ranger bar for me because Volley and Barrage are so powerful, because Area of Effect is so powerful in PvE, that preparations, which, again, are incompatible explicitly with Volley and Barrage because Volley and Barrage remove them, it's an unfortunate circumstance. I wish that Volley and Barrage had been designed a bit differently, where maybe they made preparations exhaust more quickly, but that would be an argument for making preparations last for X attacks instead of for X seconds, which could have addressed the issue, but here we are. I'm going to give Expert Focus a 3. I think this is a perfectly fine skill. It's perfectly reasonable. I think that it has some places where it can be run. I'm not upset to run it on a Ranger by any means, but the fact that it doesn't work with Volley and Barrage means that it's very unlikely to get run, and so that's just an unfortunate reality of it. Expert's Dexterity. So this is 5 energy, 20-second recharge, elite stance. For 16 seconds, you attack 33% faster, and your marksmanship attribute is increased by 2. I believe you can get this up to 100% uptime with enough expertise, but you do have to go quite high in expertise. That said, if you're sacrificing a little bit of marksmanship to get there, this compensates for it. This is a really good increased attack skill for Ranger. It is a little silly that one of their increased attack speed skills is an elite like this, but bows in general just do not, like, Rangers don't really get good options for increased attack speed. You saw it in the Beast Mastery video, if you have seen that one, that I did not like a lot of the increased attack speed skills there because they're very awkward. I would not bring this with a pet generally because I'm going to be bringing Never Rampage alone, which completely erases all of the increased attack speed problems that Rangers have if they're willing to bring a pet. But if you don't want a pet and you're focusing on bow stuff, Expert's Dexterity is a very solid way of increasing your attack rate and damage because of marksmanship increase. So I'm going to give this one a 4. I like this one quite a bit. It does something that I want. It does something that Ranger generally doesn't do super well, which is increase its attack speed with caveats and asterisks floating all around that. And it does a solid job of it. The increased attribute, marksmanship attribute, is an important part of this. And the fact that you can, as I recall, if you get enough attributes, raise it to 100% uptime is also a powerful consideration. So, a very solid skill. Glass Arrows. 5 energy, 2-second activation time, 12-second recharge, elite preparation. For 30 seconds, your arrows strike for plus 17 damage if they hit and cause bleeding for 18 seconds if they are blocked. I don't recall for sure, but I believe this plus damage here from this is armor ignoring. Actually, I'm almost positive it is. This can add a lot of damage to your bow attacks. Now, as I've said, it's a preparation. It does not work with volley. It obviously doesn't work with barrage because that's an elite. But this is extremely powerful. The skill makes your arrows hit much, much harder. And sometimes that additional hitting significantly harder is actually kind of worth it. So I actually like this preparation quite a bit. This is one of the preparations that I favor, and I'm happy to run. So I'm going to give this one a 4. It actually hits... It adds so much additional damage to your bow shots that I think it can be worth bringing, particularly if you're taking your ranger into higher level areas where the armor means that your bow attacks are going to overall be dealing less damage. Something like this can really do a lot to add a ton of additional damage to your attacks. So, a very solid skill in my opinion. And the fact that it has an additional effect on block is nice, but that's not why you're bringing this. That is definitely not why you're bringing this. Infuriating Heat. 5 energy, 3-second activation time, 15-second recharge. It is an elite nature ritual. Create a level 8 spirit. Non-spirit creatures within its range gain adrenaline twice as fast. The spirit dies after 54 seconds. So obviously this one is a support skill. You're bringing it because you have a bunch of like warriors and dervishes and paragons that you want to be able to increase the rate of adrenaline gain. I imagine that this could be part of a very interesting and powerful team build. If this is in fact the if it doubles adrenaline gain. So the wording here is a little unclear. I'm going to actually see if the concise description just happens to be... I don't like concise descriptions generally, but... Okay, doubles adrenaline gain. So that's a little bit clearer. That's kind of what I thought. In general, I don't like concise descriptions. I feel like they are weirdly formatted, but that's kind of what I was thinking. So this might work well if you're doing some sort of wonky build with a bunch of Dragon Slash warriors that are using this to make Dragon Slash crazy or something like that. But I'm going to give this one a 2. The effect is strong. Of doubling adrenaline gain, that's something where it's going to benefit everyone that uses adrenaline, but you can build with that knowledge in mind and bring skills that are high adrenaline, high reward, high damage skills, which generally builds are not going to be. So this can be quite powerful in that sort of circumstance. It is a nature ritual, though, and just keep in mind those are a giant pain in the butt to actually work with because you have to like constantly be activating them and they take forever and all that sort of stuff, or you're bringing ritual stuff to try to drag them around. Nature rituals are awkward to work with. I think that this one can potentially do something because it is quite powerful, but just keep that in mind. And I do appreciate that there's something like this that could be kind of a build around in that sort of way. Lightning Reflexes. 10 energy, 30-second recharge, stance. For 10 seconds, you have a 75% chance to block melee and projectile attacks, and you attack 33% faster. Well, this is an annoying skill when the AI uses it. It's fine. Because Ranger is a little bit limited on increased attack speed skills, asterisks, never rampage alone, this can be kind of useful for the increased attack speed. The blocking can be nice. I'm not the biggest fan of it just because the recharge is quite lengthy, but it usually is on blocking skills, which this predominantly is. I'm going to give this one a 3. I think it's solid. It has a role it can play. I do occasionally consider bringing it, but I'm just not the biggest fan of it. I'd rather bring a stance that does a little bit more, but it's not the worst or anything. Marksmans Wager. 5 energy, 2-second activation time, 24-second recharge, elite preparation. For 18 seconds, note 18 is less than 24, so this does not have 100% uptime, which is a knock against it. You gain 9 energy whenever your arrows hit, but lose 10 energy whenever your arrows fail to strike. So there are a couple of reasons why your arrows may miss. They could stray from their target because your target running around, things like that. They could be blocked. They could miss because of you're blinded or have some hex on you that decreases your accuracy, of which there are quite a few. In general, this is going to be fairly reliable. Bunches of energy. Like, this can get you a ton of energy while it's up. It is an elite, however, so that means you cannot keep it up. It takes up your elite slot. In general, Rangers don't need to bring energy management. Sort of expertise helps a lot with it. There are some options. Some builds can be very energy intensive, but something like Expert's Focus, which does not take up your elite slot and can have 100% uptime, can decrease your bow costs, and something like Body Shot, which gains you energy, can help with that as well. So, that said, Marksman's Wager is an okay skill if you need some powerful energy management. Excuse me, if you're doing some sort of bow build that's using a bunch of the 10 energy skills. That, again, your obviously 10 energy skills are going to be quite discounted if you're high in expertise, but they will chew through your energy pool with some of the low recharges on them. This can compensate for that quite powerfully, but doesn't have 100% uptime. I'm going to give this a 2. I think that you can build around it and build with it in mind, but it is generally unnecessary. I think there are other options that you can do to try to fulfill the role it is trying to fulfill that don't take up your elite slot. So I'm not the biggest fan of Marksman's Wager, but it's a cool design, and I like the idea behind it. I just kind of... It's the sort of skill that I kind of feel like could be trying to fulfill a different sort of niche or fulfill it a bit differently or something. I don't know. Maybe gain less energy but have 100% uptime. Like if it lasted for 30 seconds or had a 12-second recharge but only gained you like 6 energy, it would probably be a lot better in my eyes. Oath Shot. This is a very strange skill. So it's 10 energy, 25-second recharge, elite bow attack. If Oath Shot hits, all of your skills except for Oath Shot are recharged. If it misses, all of your skills are disabled for 5 seconds. It is 50% miss chance with low expertise. That clause is there, because they want you to have a hefty enough investment in expertise. You could theoretically use this on any profession if it didn't have that miss chance, even without the disregarding the disable clause. In general, that disable clause is there mainly for if actually I think that disable clause is there mainly for that mischance. It's it can be missed because of being straying or something like that. I definitely prefer to use this with a recurve bow or a short bow. This is a 2. This is not a skill I'd ordinarily bring. It basically means your entire bar has a 25-second recharge at maximum, because you just use this on recharge, right? Most of the time that is not actually useful. It also can allow you to makes other stuff recharge very quickly or whatever. But most of the time, this is not especially useful. When it becomes useful is when it's taking stuff that does have long recharges and shortening them. What I mean by that is generally the main time I'll consider using this is with ritualist binding rituals. So a lot of those binding rituals have 30, 40, 45, even 60-second recharges. Oath Shot allows you to drop those recharges down considerably, and expertise makes those binding rituals cheaper, so it's easier on the ranger energy pool. That's the main time I consider Oath Shot. It is a very unique effect. It's the sort of effect that could be quite powerful, but the fact that it has itself a 25-second recharge, which is pretty lengthy, kind of prevents it from really being a skill that you can abuse, if that makes sense. Point Blank Shot is identical to Zojin's Shot. They're both 5 energy with 3-second recharges. They are bow attacks. They shoot an arrow that has half the normal range, but strikes for plus 34 damage. Plus 34 is a very big amount of additional damage, especially on only 5 energy cost and 3-second recharge. That said, half the normal range is a pretty considerable downside, as often that means you will have to run up to or run closer to an enemy in order to get off. That said, if you're trying to get some additional damage on a bow, these are options. They're not the first ones I'd run to, just because that half range is a much bigger downside than it sounds like. But I think they're mostly reasonable. I'm going to go ahead and give both of them 3s, I think. Just because, they're almost 4s, but they're just not, regular go-to skills for me. They're something that I might slot into a bar. And most of the time, they're just getting overlooked. Because, frankly, I'm filling my bar up with, interrupts and stuff. So, this is... They just don't quite fit in. And like I said, if I want damage, I'm going to run to a marksmanship thing, like Keen Arrow, or one of the penetrating / sundering attack first. So here we are. Okay, practiced stance. This is another interesting one. This is 5 energy, 15-second recharge, elite stance. For 32 seconds, your preparations recharge 50% faster and last 126% longer. So I don't know why this is an elite. So recharging faster and lasting longer is an interesting set of benefits. It would be quite sweet with Marksmans Wager, I suppose, except that they're both elites. Frankly, practice stance is practically useless. Most preparations have 100% uptime as it is. This sort of makes them a little bit cheaper by making them last a bit longer, but there's only one skill that I ever see this used with, and I think there's only one skill that this really has any reason to exist with. And that's way down here in Wilderness Survival. Choking Gas, I believe, is the name, although I seem to have missed it if that's the case. Yeah, here it is, Choking Gas. This is a preparation that has an extraordinarily powerful effect. We'll cover it in more detail when I go into Wilderness Survival. But what you'll notice with it is I do have 12 Wilderness Survival right now. It has a 24-second recharge, but only a 10-second duration. By increasing the duration 126%, it goes up to a 12.6-second duration with a 12-second recharge. So you can actually keep this guy up, basically. And it basically makes your arrows automatically interrupt everything, like everything adjacent to your target foe. That's very powerful. It interrupts spells specifically. That's extremely powerful. It can be very powerfully debilitating. Choking Gas has, you cannot keep it up 100% unless you use Practice Stance, in which case you can. That's the only situation in which I ever hear or have ever heard about Practice Stance seeing any use. That gives it a 2 because that build can be extremely powerful, extremely debilitating, but Practice Stance itself, it's not really facilitating much otherwise. Most preparations that you'd want to keep up 100% of the time that you can't are elites as well, and so Practice Stance can't go in a bar with them. So that's its downside. Yeah. What most of you are getting out of this is the halved recharge, and really what it comes down to is most preparations have 100% uptime, so it's not much of a benefit. Throw Dirt. This is 5 energy, 1 second activation time, 30-second recharge skill. Target touched foe and foes adjacent to your target become blinded for 13 seconds. So I typically am not going to bring this. The reason why is because it's touch range. I don't need my ranger having to run up to the enemy to activate this. I will occasionally bring this if I'm on some sort of melee build with a ranger. It can be a nice skill to just kind of throw on there. But that's not necessarily what I'm doing. So this one sees some amount of use from me. I'm going to give it a 3. I think the effect is fine. 13 seconds of blind is pretty lengthy. In an area of effect is really nice. I'm not generally going to put this on my ranger to use defensively. I'm going to pick something like Escape or Natural Stride, something like that as a defensive option. But Throw Dirt is a powerful way to debilitate physical attackers. So obviously it doesn't have 100% uptime, but that's fine. But it's just the fact that its touch range is really what makes me not bring it a lot of the time, just because that touch range restriction is pretty severe. So, Trapper's Focus. 5 energy, 2-second activation time, 12-second recharge. Elite Preparation. For 22 seconds, your trap skills are not easily interruptible, and your Wilderness Survival attribute is increased by 2. So this is one of 2 trap-oriented skills. The other one is Trapper's Speed, which is a stance. Trapper's Focus is very powerful in a trap-focused build. Obviously, the name, it's right in the name. Most of the traps are in Wilderness Survival. This is part of why Viper's Nest, I think it was, up in Beast Mastery is a skill that I have so little regard for. Trapper's Focus, like all of your traps are focused on Wilderness Survival. Trapper's Focus is focused on Wilderness Survival. This is a way of making your traps extremely powerful and much more feasible to get off, because it removes that easily interruptible weakness that traps have. If I'm making a trap build, I'm probably going to bring Trapper's Focus. I basically never make a trap build, but I'm going to give this a 2 because I think it deserves it. It really does make the trap build a lot more reliable. There are other things that you can do for the trap build. You can try to use like Whirling Defense, which gives you a lot of blocking percent and stuff like that, but Trapper's Focus makes them able to go off, and Trapper's Speed is a very useful stance when using traps. So stuff to keep in mind. You can make that build. but I feel like it's... Historically speaking, traps have been used either in weird gimmick PvP builds or PvE builds, but they're usually weird gimmicks. So either you're going in with a bunch of rangers, trapping stuff up, and then drawing enemies to them, at which point you don't need Trapper's Focus because you're not using traps in combat. Although Trapper's Speed becomes very useful in those circumstances. Or you're doing something similar in PvP, in which case Trapper's Focus might be a little bit better, but you are vulnerable while activating it. 2 seconds is a fairly lengthy activation, so... traps are a little bit gimmicky in this game, unfortunately. You can try to make use of them and set them up, but they're really at their best when you're piling a bunch and they all activate at once and just spike somebody down. Or at least that's when they're at their most obviously powerful. But you might be able to make decent use of traps mid-combat. There are certainly some very powerful utility things you can get from them. So, stuff to consider. I'm typically not making a Trapper's build, but hey, you can, and it can be fun. A definitely different playstyle. Trapper's Speed. 5 energy, 20-second recharge. Stance for 25 seconds. Your traps recharge 25% faster and activate 25% faster. This stance ends if you successfully hit with an attack. So obviously you're not attacking while you're using the stance. You're running around placing traps. This really does help the trap build. So traps usually have a lengthy period of activation, usually about 2 seconds. So making that 1.5 is a super nice benefit, and making them recharge a bunch faster is also hugely beneficial. This is a very strong skill for the trap build. It pairs really well with Trapper's Focus. I definitely would recommend it for planting traps, for doing that trap build. Again, it's a unique style of play. I really like that these skills are here to enable that style of play, to make it a lot more powerful, a lot more feasible. It's just not typically what I'm doing. So, and Whirling Defense. Remember, we already talked about Zojin's Haste, which is a copy of Dodge, and Zojin's Shot, which is a copy of, what do they call that? Point Blank Shot. So Whirling Defense is our last expertise skill to talk about. It is 10 energy, 60-second recharge. Yes, a full minute. It is a stance. For 18 seconds, you have 75% chance to block attacks. Whenever you block a projectile in this way, adjacent foes take 10 damage. So that actually, blocking projectiles comes up a lot more than you think, just because a lot of enemies are going to be attacking you. Like casters attack you with scepters and staves that are ranged. They're projectiles. So that triggers off of those being blocked. So this can get you some additional damage. You're mainly bringing this because it is a freaking long block. 18 seconds of blocking is so long. Obviously, you're paying for that with a 60-second recharge. This is a skill that I usually am not bringing because I don't... The 60-second recharge is quite lengthy, but I don't hate bringing it. So it probably can slip onto my bar about as often as Lightning Reflexes. Lightning Reflexes technically has a slightly better uptime proportion, just because it's 10 every 30 seconds. This is 18 every 60. Obviously, those are fairly similar, both being approximately a third, although this is slightly under. This skill is so annoying when the AI uses it, though. Enemy rangers, this is a really good skill to have in the game for enemy rangers to do, because this checks you. Are you bringing something to deal with stances? Or are you bringing something to kind of ignore blocking, to get around blocking? Because there are lots of areas, especially Korna in Ilona, where the rangers there are plentiful and love their whirling defense, especially in the Consulate Docks mission. There's going to be a lot of whirling defense there. So this is a really good skill to have in the game for enemies to use, because it checks the player. It says, do you have a way of dealing with this? So I really like it from that standpoint. I'm going to give it a 3. I think it's a solid, perfectly usable skill and all that sort of thing. It usually isn't going to make it on one of my bars, but it can occasionally slip on. Something like Natural Stride is usually going to beat it out, because I want the ability to activate it more quickly or more frequently. And the increased move speed is often mildly more valuable than the damage off projectiles. But keep in mind that this can be really nasty when the AI uses it, because if you're like bringing a bunch of spirits, or there's a Necromancer minion, Bone Fiends, I believe, that are ranged attackers, your spellcasters, all that sort of thing. If you're against an enemy and there's a bunch of wanding going on, a bunch of minions and other things, and whirling defense goes off, you can suddenly take a lot of damage. But yeah, so this is a skill. It's great for the game because of what it means the player has to account for it. 18 seconds is way too long to just want to sit around there waiting for that to wear off. It's a very, very, very long duration. So it does mean that you want to bring something to deal with stances. But in terms of a skill that I bring myself, not typically. So anyway, that goes ahead and wraps up the expertise portion. So with expertise covered, I guess next is marksmanship. So that's what we're going to talk about next time, everybody. Marksmanship. Until then, take care and goodbye.